Welcome to the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. Today is our 199th episode on June 6, 2024. My name is Andy Z.
And I'm Annie Day.
This is a show about the world and for a radically new world. This is a show where we dig deep beneath the surface of all the things that are afflicting humanity here and around the world. And we get to the actual cause of it, and we bring you the solution for a new, emancipating way we could be living.
Yeah, exactly. An actual revolution. And we base ourselves on the revolutionary leadership and the new communism developed by Bob Avakian, somebody who's about an actual overthrow of this system and bringing into being a fundamentally different, a far better and emancipating world. We're going to hear directly from Bob Avakian later in today's episode about why you need a scientific approach to make this revolution.
And also later in today's show, I'm going to be speaking about a very important call that went up on Revcom.us this week for a Revolution Summer 2024. But we're going to start with you, Annie, introducing a really special interview that we have for today's program.
That's right. We are now in the 8th month of the U.S.-backed Israeli genocide of the Palestinian people. Over 36,000 people have been killed, including more than 15,000 children. This doesn't include the thousands missing and likely buried beneath the rubble from the demolished buildings, which now covers most of the Gaza Strip. Over 500 people have been killed in the West Bank in wanton Israeli violence and terror, with more than 100 of those children. People in Gaza are being starved by Israel, who won't allow most food aid or water in. Sewage flooded the city of Khan Yunis when a pipeline burst, pouring into the tents of displaced people tightly packed together. Attacks are intensifying in central Gaza, and the massacres are too many to keep up with. This nightmare, this terror, this genocide is backed, funded, and fueled by the U.S. And people in this country have a special responsibility to know what this country is doing and to act urgently to stop it.
Today, we are featuring an interview that Alan Goodman, a regular correspondent for the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show and for our website, revcom.us, that he did with Dr Mohamad Abdelfattah about the hellish situation on the ground for the people in Gaza. Dr. Abdelfattah is an intensive care unit physician here in Southern California, and he's an organizer with the Orange County for Justice in Palestine, and we're going to include their Instagram link in the description below. Dr. Abdelfattah went to Gaza to volunteer with the Palestinian American Medical Association at the European Gaza Hospital for 2 weeks. But when Israel closed the border with Egypt, preventing aid from getting in, he ended up trapped for an extra week. So right now, let's go to the interview that Alan did with Dr. Mohamad Abdelfattah.
All right. So thank you so much for taking time out of your extremely busy day and your important work, Dr. Abdelfattah, to describe for our audience, you were in Gaza at the European Gaza Hospital through mid-May. And can you just paint a picture for our audience of what you experienced there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. So we entered Gaza May 1st, and so it's a very short drive from the border, the hospital. We had to, once we crossed into Gaza, we had to wait for the green light from the Israeli authorities before we could move.
Sorry to interrupt, but you went through the Rafah crossing from Egypt into Israel, right? Because, okay, yeah.
Right.
Thanks.
So it was Rafah on the Egyptian side and then into the Palestinian side, the Gaza Palestinian side. So once we cross through, the Israeli authorities have to give you a deconflicted route, which means that there's a route that they have approved that they acknowledge they will not target. And this has allowed us to travel from the border to the hospital. So we waited about 45 minutes to an hour in the bus waiting for the green light. And once we got the green light, we entered Gaza. And
I want to interrupt you again, and apologies for that. But just for the record, the being certified as traveling on a deconflicted route, which means that there is no military activity there, has not been a 100% guarantee of safety for medical workers. Am I right?
Absolutely correct. So these deconflicted routes have been used in the past for any travel of foreign doctors, foreign convoys. And this was actually used during the World Central Kitchen disaster catastrophe. They had a deconflicted route, but still were targeted. Even while we were in EGH, we can get into this later. There was a UN convoy that was sent to our hospital via a deconflicted route, and they were targeted. So that was always in the back of our mind that yes, this is in coordination with the Israeli authorities, but that still doesn't mean it's 100% safe. And there was always a risk. So that was always in our minds. But once we did get the green light, the bus started to move into Gaza. And as soon as you enter Gaza, it's just very evident that it was pitch black. So it was in the evening time, and there was absolutely no electricity. Everywhere I looked, just darkness. And what I recall is I remember seeing kids outside of their destroyed homes on their phones. So I could see their faces being lit up on their phones, and they're sitting there in the dark on their phones. And I saw a lot of kids, a lot of family members sitting outside their homes in the dark. And so that was very, very surreal, just seeing how much darkness there was. I'd never seen such a dark place before. So it was about a 10, 15-minute drive into Gaza before we went into EGH, European Gaza Hospital, before we arrived. And we had about 3 buses with us full of our colleagues. We had about 19 colleagues and 250 pieces of luggage. So we had a lot of luggage, which we brought in medical supplies, sandals, books, candy for the kids, coloring books for the kids, feminine hygiene products, so a variety of supplies that we know are very limited in Gaza. And as soon as you arrive in the hospital, you're immediately notice the hundreds of kids, thousands of kids actually. The hospital itself, they told us when we arrived there, it was sheltering 30,000 people. So 30,000
Wow.
men, women, and children who've fled their homes multiple times throughout this war, 4 or 5 times. They've been going to different areas that they considered safe. And so they were seeking shelter at the European Gaza Hospital. So there are kids everywhere. As soon as we step foot outside of the bus, they attacked you pretty much. They jumped, they give you hugs, they're giving you high fives, they're saying, welcome to Gaza, smiling, and just eager to get our names and learn about us. But they were everywhere, surrounded. They literally flocked to us. And so we were greeted, like it was a really nice greeting, a warm greeting from the kids. And then we went into the dorms, and the kids actually helped unload each suitcase. So there was like a train of kids taking down each suitcase, each 250 pieces of luggages that we brought one by one, and they were helping unload our luggage. It was an amazing sight, to be honest. And so that was immediately what you noticed outside the hospital are these kids. They're all very thin. They're all malnourished. You can tell just looking at them. Their clothes, there's holes in their clothes. You can tell that they haven't bathed for several days, maybe even several weeks. A lot of them are barefoot. They don't have any shoes on at all. And they're, happy-go-lucky. They're smiling. They're playing. Their kids are resilient. So you can't even really tell that there's a war going on, despite, hearing the bombs and the drones in the background. So this is all before you even enter the hospital. Once we enter the hospital, you see just a chaotic scene. Again, it's a shelter and a hospital. So every inch of the hospital, you have a human being there, a family seeking shelter, men, women, and children. And each inch of the hospital just separated by the thin white sheets that they hang up to the ceiling. And so on each corridor, there's a sheet, and there's a small area in the middle of the corridor where doctors and patients are trying to navigate through the hospital. So you're seeing kids running in and out of the sheets. There's a lot of noise, people talking, women are cooking. People, there's sick people. There's a hospital. People are coughing, babies are crying. So it's kind of a scene I've never seen before in a hospital, not something you would expect in a hospital. And so my first day, I remember I went into the ER. And
I just ask, before you move to the ER,
yeah,
the incredible resiliency, and I mean, I'm sure there's chaos like you described, but I mean, just to maintain your humanity under those conditions is itself,
Yeah,
it's overwhelming.
absolutely the most resilient people you'll ever meet. Again, the kids playing like nothing is happening. There are people getting haircuts in the hospital compound. They're cracking jokes. They have every aspect of their life is difficult. Finding food, finding water, finding a clean bathroom. I mean, there are no clean bathrooms. Finding a bathroom in general. Just being able to charge your cell phone. Just being able to find some sort of quiet place. They don't have any of that. Every aspect of their life has been under attack. And so that, I mean, immediately was a lesson for me. How blessed we are in this country, how all these things that we take for granted, they don't have any of them. So that was very evident. And just to see them, not sitting there in sorrow and crying and complaining and in anger and just, like seeming very normal, that was unbelievable to me. I was like, these people have been in such horrific conditions for 8 months. I couldn't understand how they appear to be normal or functioning normal. That was it just shows how resilient they are.
So now let's move to the kind of experience you had. What is your specialty as a physician, and what kind of work were you doing, as a doctor in the hospital?
Sure. So back here in the States, I'm an ICU physician. And my role on this mission was to help out in the intensive care unit at EGH. And then I also spent time in the emergency room. And so my first day there, I wanted to go check out the ER, see what capabilities they had. And it was immediately I was blown back by the fact that how many people are in the ER, just overrun, patients on the floor, all patients in every bed. And so there's a resuscitation room where the critical patients go. And I walked into that room and just immediately noticed kids. It was about a 1.5-year-old kid, a boy. He was holding his arm up and just screaming, crying uncontrollably in pain. And I looked at his arm and you just see his whole forearm. The skin is peeling off. He's got a severe burn. And he's just screaming, asking for his dad. And that was difficult for me, having a boy around his age. And literally right adjacent to him was another baby, about a 2-month-old, sitting in her mom's arms, just crying uncontrollably. And her foot was, there was a large laceration, a large gash in her foot. And you can see the muscle layers of her foot. It was a very deep wound. This was from shrapnel. And this was probably a 4-month-old girl crying. She had curls in her hair, and it was just really a devastating scene to immediately. This is the first thing I saw was kids, being the victims of this war, and that was the continued trend. To be honest with you, that first day, it was overwhelming for me. I had to actually leave. I was like, I'm sorry, I can't help here. There was another ER doctor, emergency room doctor, that was with our group. He was already there, and so he was taking care of the patients. And I told him, look, I'm sorry, I have to leave. So I went to the ICU. And in the ICU, just another scene that I'm not used to seeing. Just the ICU monitors consistently going off, the alarms beeping. Usually in a traditional ICU, when an alarm is going off on a monitor, it's a emergency situation. It's a disaster. People are responding. But throughout the ICU, the alarms are just continuously going off. And that's because the monitors, the sensors themselves are defective. So they're not accurately picking up the right signals. So they're constantly alarming. And the staff, they're not taking those alarms seriously because they know they're defective. So as soon as you walk into the ICU, that's one thing you hear are the alarming monitors. Just looking at the ICU, what was very obvious was the amount of children in the ICU. So I'm an adult ICU physician. I don't treat kids. But in the EGH intensive care unit, there's an adult bed, and right adjacent to him is a child. And so majority of the victims in the ICU, of the sick, were kids of all ages, 4 months old up to 10, 11, 12-year-olds on ventilators with severe burns, horrific explosive injuries where they have shrapnel all over their bodies, amputated limbs because of the severity of their injuries. The burn patients, when you have burn wounds, you have to wrap these wounds in bandages and change them very frequently. However, because of the lack of staff and resources, not able to change these dressings daily, they're becoming infected. And so a lot of the dressings are weeping liquids, blood and yellow liquids weeping from these dressings. And what you notice is flies flying around the ICU. They're flies landing on these wounds and then traveling to the next door patient. And so there's no infection control in the ICU. Bacteria, very aggressive, resistant bacteria are spreading throughout the ICU. They don't have hand soap. The doctors and nurses don't have hand soap to wash their hands. And so there's no way to prevent this sort of bacteria from spreading. All of the ventilators, what we noticed while we were there, are contaminated with very resistant bacteria. So when someone needs a ventilator, which you'll notice after a few days is you're dealing with a really aggressive pneumonia because the ventilators are contaminated with this bacteria. So it's a horrific scene, to be honest.
So I just have to, establish something for our audience, which is that all these incredible shortages, and just in case anyone was wondering, those 150 suitcases were not your personal luggage. They were essential medical supplies that you're talking about here. But this is a man-made shortage. It's not that the world medical community doesn't have spare supplies that could be brought in there. It's not even that many of those supplies are not waiting in trucks. It's that they are being blocked from coming in. Am I right?
100%. This is an intentional man-made catastrophe, humanitarian catastrophe. One detail I forgot to mention. When you enter Rafah from Egypt, you're passing through Rafah, and what you notice are hundreds, maybe even thousands of aid trucks just sitting there, large trucks filled with humanitarian aid, medical supplies that have been waiting for weeks to enter Gaza. And there are so many trucks, miles of trucks lined up waiting to enter. And so that was honestly maddening for me because I know we were allowed to bring about 10 suitcases each. And I was trying to fit everything I could in those 10 suitcases, every medical supply, every even non-medical supply, protein bars. We were trying to bring baby formula. We were trying to bring all that we could. And, we were limited by the weight of each suitcase. We had 50 pounds that we could not pass for each suitcase while we're traveling with the airline. So, we filled them up to capacity. And just knowing that just right outside, a few miles outside of Gaza, is so many trucks with so much more aid that can get to the people of Gaza that is not being allowed in, that's intentionally being blocked. It was very frustrating. And even once I entered Gaza and started distributing the supplies that we had, we didn't have enough. We were running out. Even the sandals for the kids that we brought, you give them out and you'll see there'll be 5 more kids behind them that want sandals, and you don't have enough. And it's really devastating because it led to some problems amongst the kids. The kids were fighting amongst each other over a pair of sandals. And so every aspect of this war has been tough to accept. I've noticed this is a war on children. I'll tell you, the children are paying the brunt of this war. From the ones that are outside who have no routine. There's no school. They haven't been to school for 8 months. They're wandering the halls of the hospital. They're playing. They have no routine in their lives. I saw them playing at 1, 2 a.m. They're all malnourished. They're not getting enough nutrition. And so this is all going to have consequences.
Yeah, I'd like to just interject on the malnutrition problem because I've seen reports from other doctors that people and children in particular are not able to recover from wounds that normally, say, I would go to the ER and get stitched up and then my skin would heal, but they don't. And also, women who are trying to breastfeed babies just don't have the caloric intake to be able to maintain a body, really. I'm sure you can put it in more medical terms, but.
Of course. And we notice this in the ICU. With these patients with severe burns, they require a lot of nutrition, a lot of aggressive nutrition supplementation in the ICU. So if they were in the ICU in America, we'd be providing very aggressive nutrition through feeding tubes and just making sure that we're hitting those numbers, those calories every single day. Whereas in Gaza, the hospital doesn't provide food for these patients. The hospital doesn't have meals to give each patient. So basically what we had to do is encourage the families. Hey, please start feeding your loved one. And they're not able to get food. It's tough for them to get food. So there's no way to keep up with the nutritional requirements for severe burn patients. So yes, these wounds are not healing, and leading to chronic infections, chronic difficult debilities long term in their lives, and a lot of them succumb to their wounds. That's what I noticed. As an ICU doctor, you want to stabilize someone that's unstable. And so we do that in Gaza, but after 24, 48 hours, they're dying of infection. So for me, it was very frustrating in that I didn't see us making a big difference. Honestly, the mortality in our ICU in Gaza, probably 70 to 80%. So not many were surviving. The average mortality in American ICU is about 9-10%. So many of these patients that we were helping or we thought we were helping in Gaza would eventually die of infection. And so it was really hard on us, especially us ICU doctors, or ICU doctors with other groups that were with us. And for us, you want to do everything that you can for these patients. You want to have a good outcome, and to not see good outcomes was tough.
Well, I just want to maybe in closing appreciate that and kind of responding to what you're saying. In addition to, and perhaps even more important, I don't know, than what you were actually able to do in treating people, is doing what you're doing right now, which is bringing to the world what the Palestinian people in Gaza are subjected to is, and you really see it in the hospital, because this is kind of where, everything that's being done to people, including the, again, a man-made famine.
Yeah.
And so that's all part of the picture. And I really want to appreciate your courage, both in going and also what you're doing to speak out and tell people like you are right now what it is. And I would challenge people in this country to, this is me speaking, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but to appreciate that it is your government, the United States, that fundamentally enables all of this diplomatically, economically, and militarily. And so everyone listening to this interview has a responsibility to find ways to act here commensurately to stop this. So I really want to thank you. And you have anything you wanted to add, or?
I appreciate that. I mean, that was eating me, honestly, alive while I was in Gaza. Just that thought of being an American taxpayer, knowing that my taxpayer dollars are paying for these weapons, these munitions that are dropping on these kids. And I know that this war is, as much as it is Netanyahu's, it's Biden's war. He has been supplying the weapons that are continuing this war. He has been providing international cover for any sort of criticism to the Israeli conduct of this war. And so he's allowing this war to progress and to continue. And he can end this war with one phone call. And so that's why, as Americans, we need to ask these questions. Like, what are we gaining out of this war? I have patients in Los Angeles, in a very underserved area of Los Angeles, that cannot afford their inhalers. Their inhalers that I'm trying to prescribe to them to control their chronic lung disease, they can't afford them. And so their lung disease is progressing. They're scared to go to the ER because they're worried about medical bills. And so we have a huge issue with our healthcare system here. We have student loan issue. We have housing issues, homelessness in our country. Like, this money that we're sending to Israel to bomb these children can be used here in our own country to improve the lives of our own American citizens. And so that's why it's a responsibility on every American to end this war. It's an unjust war. These parents, they have no way to protect their kids. One last story I want to just let you know or explain is while I was in the ICU, we met a family who they were told to evacuate a specific area in Rafah while we were there and to go to El Mawasi. El Mawasi is an area along the beach where a lot of these refugees from Rafah went to live in tents on the beach. This was considered a safe zone. So this family left their home and went to El Mawasi. And on this particular day, it was very hot out. So their child, about 11, 12 years old, went swimming with his friends because it's right on the beach near El Mawasi. And while they were swimming, they came under Israeli gunfire. And so there was about 5 kids swimming at the time. They started panicking and swimming in different directions. And this child fell to the bottom of the ocean and ended up drowning. So they brought him in to EGH, and we saw him in the ER. He was blue, and he passed. He had sand in his fingers. You can see. And it just goes to show you that there's no safe area in Gaza. Not one area is safe. And they told me this over and over again, that they don't trust the Israeli authorities when they tell them to move to different areas, but they want to try. They hope that this is a safe zone, and it ends up not being a safe reality for them. And so there's no safe area in Gaza. These parents can't even protect their children. The most basic right of a parent is you want to protect your child, and they can't do that. And so it's an unjust war. And I would just plead to everyone listening to do your part in helping to end this war.
Well, thank you for that. And we should take that as a challenge. So thanks again for your time. Really appreciate your courage in going, and also I know you're working hard to share what you learned and what you experienced there, and we should all take inspiration from that. So thanks again for your time.
I appreciate your time as well. Thanks for having me.
I think that's a really important interview that should be shared with all kinds of people to really get a feel for what it's like in Gaza and in these hospitals and the tremendous crime against humanity that's being committed. And look, we also want to play a short dispatch from Sunsara Taylor, who on Wednesday went out to UCLA here in Los Angeles at a protest of doctors and medical students standing up for Palestinian lives and for the amnesty of student protesters. UCLA student protesters are facing, in some cases, suspension, expulsion, not getting their degrees, as well as criminal charges. And so here's a short Instagram interview that Sunsara did with representatives from UCLA residents for Palestine.
Not warfare! Healthcare, not warfare! Healthcare, not warfare! Healthcare, not warfare! For Gaza, we care! For Gaza, we care!
Tell us what's happening out here today.
So we as resident physicians at UCLA are out here with a few specific demands. Amnesty for protesters whose speech was violently repressed at the UCLA Solidarity Encampment.
We demand full legal, academic, and disciplinary amnesty for these students, faculty, staff, and house staff who participated in the encampment and were arrested and injured.
We also are working to advocate for more robust protections for students and trainees to be able to articulate freedom of expression, specifically political speech.
We demand recognition of the public health crisis in Gaza and a call for permanent ceasefire by UCLA Health. That's right.
As well as working towards divestment of all UCLA resources.
Divest from weapons manufacturers, military contractors, and all companies profiting off of Israel's war in Gaza.
Could you speak a little bit about the medical conditions in Gaza and how that has struck you personally, but also in terms of your understanding and your role as a healthcare worker?
Yeah, we know that hospitals have been systematically destroyed in Palestine. We know that there has been mass killing of healthcare workers, including doctors and nurses.
The healthcare infrastructure of 2 million Gazans has been decimated, and their fellow physicians in Gaza have been murdered in their very own hospitals.
From our standpoint, it's part of our kind of moral and ethical responsibility as healthcare workers to protect, in times of humanitarian crisis, access to medical care for individuals who are experiencing genocide, and we feel like that's something that directly speaks to the core of what our institution is training us to do as physicians.
I want to point to a contradiction of what you just said. the institution training you to care for people's health and livelihood, and yet many of you had to care for people sent to this emergency room here at UCLA precisely because of the actions of that same institution.
Well, we volunteered as medics at the encampment when it was being swept by a large deployment of police officers on campus.
We provided urgent care and triaged dozens of students, faculty, and community members whose injuries required higher level care, including severe head lacerations, facial fractures, subarachnoid hemorrhages, piercing rubber bullet wounds, broken bones, police-induced trample injuries, and asthma attacks induced by chemical irritants.
We do not think that it's right that students on campus who are here to learn, here to protest, here to exercise their political rights, should end up in an emergency room setting or hit with rubber bullets or harmed in any way, really physically.
Do you feel like you've been changed in the last month and a half through these activities?
I think just the students have inspired us in more ways than we can count. We are taking care of each other. I think there have been beautiful experiments on North Campus in how to care for one another in this time.
Just really being kind of awakened to the responsibility that we have to those, to that younger generation, to really help them make the kind of society that I think we all want to live in. It's easy to get swept up in everything that we have to do on a daily basis to keep the hospital running, to do the logistics of daily life. But I think this has really been an important call to action for a lot of us, realizing that not just the privilege that we have, but the responsibility we have to that younger generation.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This week, Revcom.us published an important new article by Bob Avakian, Philosophy and Revolution. This two-part article struggles for a scientific understanding of reality in opposition to all the wrong ideas that truth depends on people's race, people's gender, and so on. That's your truth. This is my truth. All these wrong and anti-scientific methods that keep people locked into the killing confines of this system, preventing them from recognizing the problem that we face and the scientifically grounded truth that a radically different and a far better world is possible. The article is in two parts. Part one is titled Objective Reality and Truth in Opposition to Paltry Yet Poisonous Opportunism, Perversions of Communist Theory in the Name of Proletarian Communist Revolution. And part two is titled More on Marxist Reflection Theory, the Importance of Communism as a Scientific Approach to Understanding and Transforming Reality, and Refutation of Opportunist Attacks on this by Phony Communists. So that sounds like a lot, but the articles are deep and important, and we encourage everyone watching to go to revcom.us, dig into this, discuss it with others, and comment below with your responses. This scientific understanding is at the heart of the new communism that Bob Avakian has developed, and is a big part of the fight that we have to wage with people throughout society. So in light of this article, we want to play an excerpt from an important series of interviews that we did on the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show with Bob Avakian. And this is where he answers why you need a scientific approach to know and change the world.
You know, we've played often on this show, we talk about the importance that you've put on to a scientific approach to reality, and how central that is to people being able to know and change the world. And we've played some incredible things from that very dialogue on the show. But I think it would be really helpful for our audience to hear from you a very basic understanding of what is science and why is it so important, when, particularly at a time when so many people, including among the oppressed, are, oh, science, I'm not going to get vaccinated, I'm not going to do any of this, who knows what this is all about. So I think it's very important for people to understand what it, in its essence, actually is.
Look, science, you know, there's an interview with Ardea Skybreak, Science and Revolution, and she makes a point and emphasizes it. Science is an evidence-based process. You go by you interact with the larger reality. You gather evidence and facts about what that shows, what comes forward, what the evidence is about different phenomena, different parts of reality. And then that's the raw material from which you then look to see what are the patterns in that reality, what might be superficial, what's deeper, what are the underlying causes of it. You have to go to work to do that. And then you analyze that, and then you synthesize it. You draw together the essential things that you can learn from that about the patterns in reality and underlying driving forces in reality. That's what science does in any particular. It's just a way of engaging and learning from reality by applying the method of analyzing what you're learning from interacting with reality, and then drawing together the key things to get to the core, the essence of what that shows. And this is in whether it's medicine or any other physics, biology, archaeology, any other sphere of science. This is what people who are applying the scientific method are doing. And a lot of people these days are anti-scientific, and they don't want to hear about science because some things have been really terrible things have been done in in the sphere of medicine, like the Tuskegee experiment, where they let black people who had syphilis just suffer from it to see what would happen. And there have been other things of that sort. But Skybreak also makes the point that that's bad science. Mm-hmm. And you can use the good science, the actual scientific method that I was just speaking to actually learn about reality and to refute the bad science. And some people say, and it's understandable, people say, especially people who are oppressed, well, they've lied to us about everything. They lie to us, about the history of the country. They lie to us about the present reality of the country. They lie to us about how people are treated in this country now. They just lie. So why should we believe anything they say? And the answer to that is you shouldn't believe anything they say, quote unquote, but you should apply the scientific method to actually investigate reality and then do the work to determine what that actually shows. And for example, vaccines. All right, yes, it's true. The ruling class, down through history here in this country and other places, carried out terrible things in the name of science, including medical science. But then if you analyze further, like, do you really think, for example, the ruling class of this country wants total chaos where everybody is so sick that they can't even go to work, that the economy breaks down, that they're weakened in the international arena where they're contending with other imperialists like Russia and China? But more to the point, look at the actual evidence. Millions of people have gotten vaccines. There are almost no serious side effects from all this. Look at the actual evidence. Don't look at what somebody says on the social media. I mean, you can look at it, but then compare it to reality. Mm-hmm. Look at the actual evidence about, that's how Kyrie Irving and apparently Shaquille O'Neal and some of these other fools talking about how the world is flat. Well, look at the evidence. Is there any evidence to show that the earth is not flat, that it's actually round? There's plenty of scientific evidence. You can look into it yourself and you can determine for yourself what's true. And that's what the scientific method is. And everybody, not just scientists, but everybody when they're dealing not only with natural phenomena such as hurricanes, are hurricanes, do they occur because God wants to punish America because it's letting gay people have rights? That's what Christian fundamentalists say. Is that the truth? Or do hurricanes happen because a whole bunch of people in Philadelphia sneezed at the same time? Or is there actually some real causes of hurricanes? What are they? Look into it. Determine for yourself what the evidence shows on the basis of actually rationally engaging reality and looking at it and then synthesizing the evidence. Yes, the earth is actually round. I mean, I don't know if he's joking or not, but I read a statement by Shaquille O'Neal where he said, well, I've flown from one part of the world to another and I never tipped over, so how could it be round? I mean, I'm sorry, but first of all, Shaquille O'Neal's a pig anyway, and proud of it. If you don't believe me, go check it out. He brags about how he went on raids with the drug administration and stuck some drug dealer's or alleged drug dealer's face down in the toilet. So, I don't have anything good to say about Shaquille O'Neal to begin with. But this is a world-class level of ignorance to talk about that. I mean, if you put an ant on a basketball and it goes around the basketball, it's not going to flip over, okay? And the same thing is true with the big sphere of the earth compared to a tiny airplane, okay? The airplane goes around like an ant going around a basketball. You're not going to flip over just because it's round, okay? I mean, but don't take my word for it. Go do some work. That's one of the things we talk about in the culture, the lack of curiosity, just laziness. People not really wanting to do, don't want to read a book, don't want to learn about history. Okay, maybe I'm overstating, it's not everybody, but it's way too much a phenomenon in the culture. The lack of curiosity, it's one of the striking things. How are you ever going to bring into being a better world if you're not curious, including about the way the world is and why it's the way it is? So, do some work. This is work anybody can do. Anybody can look into the evidence. Anybody can apply the scientific method to determine what's true. And that's what people need to do. I've said it before. Don't believe anything on faith. But go by the evidence. Go by the scientific method to determine what's actually true, and not what's a bunch of bullshit that some people put out there, to try to mislead you, or because they themselves are misled. And may make you feel good for a little while, but it isn't going to change anything that makes you feel bad.
Last Thursday, as our show was being posted, the fascist-in-chief Donald Trump was being convicted for 34 felonies in a New York court.
And the story riveting the nation and much of the world, the unprecedented conviction of a former president.
For the first time in American history,
we really do need a new word for unprecedented. Donald Trump became the first American president in history to be convicted of a crime.
Former President Trump vows to appeal his historic guilty conviction.
A presidential candidate found guilty on 34 counts is clearly unlike anything we've ever seen.
Immediately after the verdict, howls went up from the bloodthirsty fascists, literally calling for lynch mobs to go after the judge, the jury, and anyone who even defends this verdict. And this was not just Trump's social base. These threats came from top fascist figures in the ruling class.
You have to get in the game, Republicans. I want every Secretary of State. Are you purging your voting rolls of non-citizens right now? Is every Republican state AG opening investigations into voter fraud right now? Is every House committee controlled by Republicans using its subpoena power in every way it needs to right now? Is every Republican DA starting every investigation they need to right now? Is every donor off the sidelines and in the game, the big dollar guys, the rich guys, the wealthy guys? Every facet of Republican Party politics and power has to be used right now to go toe to toe with Marxism and beat these communists.
President Biden should just be ready, because on January 20 of next year, when he's former President Joe Biden, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I am going to encourage all of my colleagues and everybody that I have any influence over as a member of Congress to aggressively go after the president and his entire family, his entire crime family.
Focus on those that want people to believe that you want retribution, that you will use the system of justice to go after your political enemies.
So, look, when this election is over, based on what they've done, I would have every right to go after them. And it's easy because it's Joe Biden and you see all the criminality.
The next day, Biden responded with a speech celebrating the rule of law, while in the same speech defending and backing a genocide of the Palestinian people. Biden posted on social media that there's only one way to keep Donald Trump out of the Oval Office, at the ballot box. But while the Democrats are trying to confine you to thinking and acting within the electoral framework, the fascists are using every move against Trump, even legitimate legal cases, to prepare for civil war if they lose that election. Trump and the Republic-Fascists are working now to get their fanatical, unthinking social base of millions to believe that any outcome of the 2024 elections that does not result in Trump coming to power is completely illegitimate. That the Democrats are rigging the next election, and anything that the fascists do in the service of getting into power is justified and even sanctified by God. Look, left to itself, the future will be a complete and utter nightmare for humanity. But people who care about the interests of humanity cannot leave this to itself. This sharpening clash holds the potential for extreme danger, but it also holds a potential opening for a radical revolution to emancipate humanity. So let's listen to Bob Avakian from his social media dispatch, Revolution Number 8, which speaks briefly to why this revolution is more possible in this time.
The basic reason why this revolution is possible now is because those who have ruled this country for so long are bitterly and deeply divided among themselves, while the country as a whole is being torn apart by divisions that can no longer be covered over, and things can no longer be held together in the way they have been for generations. Everything will very likely be coming to a head and coming up for grabs this year, 2024, with the presidential election this year a sharp focus of the fight between the dominating ruling class parties, Democrats and Republicans, a fight that is very likely to break all out of the bounds of the normal way they exercise power over the people and keep their whole murderous system going.
To realize the possibility for revolution that Bob Avakian just spoke of requires us to prepare and to act to change the whole political situation, the whole political landscape now, where people see not just genocide Joe Biden and the war criminal Democrats on the one hand and the MAGA Trump fascists on the other, or cast meaningless votes in protest, but to one where a real revolution is on the map. There's a big plan that's just been posted on revcom.us, and I'm going to read that, or read the beginning of it. The Revcom Corps for the Emancipation of Humanity calls on you to join Revolution Summer 2024, working for a real revolution, for a whole new emancipating way to live, a fundamentally different system. Stop the U.S.-Israeli genocide of Palestinians now. Another world is possible. It is time for something new, for something radical, for you to do something that really matters. Look around. Israel is carrying out a heartless genocide against the Palestinian people. Whole families buried in rubble or burned alive. All of this backed and funded by the U.S. government. Capitalism, imperialism is poisoning the air and the oceans and killing off species and destroying our planet. Women's right to abortion and LGBTQ rights are being ripped away. The police are killing black and brown people on the daily. People look at the future with a feeling of doom. This is not the world you want. It's not the future you should accept. Isn't it time that you join with others to do something about it? This summer, be a part of making history. Be a part of fighting for a whole new way humanity could be living. Be a part of Revolution Summer 2024. That's the beginning of the call for Revolution Summer 2024, and then it goes on to get into why, as Bob Avakian has shown, revolution is possible in this time, bringing alive this slogan, no fascist Trump, no genocide Joe, the whole damn system has got to go.
No fascist Trump, no genocide Joe. The whole damn system's got to go. The whole damn system's got to go.
At the center of the Revolution Summer We will be taking the fight against the U.S.-Israeli genocide in Gaza and the fight for a real revolution to people everywhere. And Revolution Summer will culminate with people from all across the country going to Chicago for the Democratic National Convention, the DNC, in late August. Revolution Summer will bring the inspiring fight against the genocide and in support of the Palestinian people that started on the campuses out to the whole society, with a special focus on bringing it to those people who catch the hardest hell under this system and who can and need to be the backbone of a real revolution in this country. A revolution here would lift a tremendous burden off of humanity all over the world and would bring in a whole different and far better way to live with the Constitution for a new socialist republic authored by Bob Avakian, opening up the road to overcoming all the repression, oppression, and exploitation that is daily life for billions of people under this system. The call for Revolution Summer that I just read begins with all the crimes that face humanity. We need a revolution for a whole new way to live, and this summer, you can become a part of making that real. We're going to do a lot of things. We're going to study Bob Avakian's leadership as we learn and apply the science of revolution while working together with others to put this revolution before millions and win growing numbers of people to get organized, yes, to make it real. We're going to live by and fight for the REVCOM Core for the Emancipation of Humanity's Points of Attention for the Revolution, a liberating code for revolution. And we're going to build up a bold, organized, serious, and disciplined force to defend the people from attacks on their rights and lives by forces in and out of government as part of transforming the people for revolution. And we're going to be at the DNC, making it clear to one and all that there is a force that is calling on you to get with the revolution. This is the way to keep it real this summer. If you're ready to fight for something that would really matter, DM at the Revcoms or write us at the revcoms@gmail.com or contact the REVCOM Core for the Emancipation of Humanity in your area.
Before we close today's show, we have to speak to Biden's vicious anti-immigrant executive order that he signed this Tuesday. This order will severely restrict the right to seek asylum, closing down the border if asylum requests reach more than 2,500 per day. This is an ugly attack on desperate people fleeing their home countries, countries ravaged by war, climate catastrophe, economic devastation, all caused by the system of U.S. capitalism imperialism. While Biden doesn't spew the same ugly racism that Trump and the fascists do, this underscores the fact that we do not have an immigration problem. We have an imperialism problem. It underscores the truth of what Andy just said and what has to be manifest in the streets all summer. No fascist Trump, no genocide Joe. The whole damn system's got to go. This executive order will lead to many more people dying in an attempt to cross the border, in more far-flung deserts and in more turbulent waters. We want to share a short video from the RNL show last year about the increased and the needless suffering that this will bring down.
For decades, the U.S.-Mexico border area has been a zone of death, pain, and suffering inflicted by U.S. imperialism upon tens of millions of migrants. People have died trying to reach it.
Por lo que me quedo es ir a una caja de madera a darle su último adiós.
People have died trying to cross it. People have died if they get across and then are hunted like animals over deserts, mountains, and raging streams. in searing heat or freezing cold. People have been run over by trucks on lonely rural blacktops. The corpses of people bitten by rattlesnakes have been left to rot, miles from help. Millions have been expelled or deported back to the US-created poverty and violence they are trying to escape. The stories, songs, and poems of their anguish could fill volumes. These are not random incidents. They are a direct result of the relentless exploitation enforced by brutal repression the U.S. has inflicted on the peoples and countries of this hemisphere for over a century. They are a direct consequence of the policies and actions taken by the ruling class of this country, both Democrats and Republicans. And now, a massive leap in that repression will quite possibly erupt very soon.
All right, Annie, that brings us to the end of this, the 199th episode of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show.
Yeah, it was very good to be with you here today, Andy, and with you all watching. Mark your calendar, Sunday, June 23rd, for a major national fundraising live stream to raise big funds for the whole Revolution Summer that Andy talked about earlier in the show. Write to us at the Revcoms at gmail.com. Start reaching out now to people you know. Think about what you can give. Think about ideas you have for fundraising projects. And if you want to be part of organizing this live stream, if you want to be part of feeding in your ideas, if you want to be part of thinking about how to build a national movement for an actual revolution with people who are taking responsibility for that revolution, then write to us, because we're going to do a special Zoom this coming Tuesday night where we're going to get into this. We're going to make plans for the live stream. We're going to hear your ideas, and we're going to talk about how to impact all of society urgently with this revolution.
I just want to underscore one more time how important these funds are. I spoke about not only are we going to have this Revolution Summer in cities across the country, but we're going to be going to Chicago for the DNC. People are going to be traveling. We need lots and lots of funds for this. And we also need you to become a patron of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. As we look towards the fall, when the possibility for revolution could open up, if we act in it in the right way, we need to have this show seen by many, many more people than see it now. And that's going to require a lot of publicity and capability to really scale things up. So become a patron of the RNL show. Now, Annie, we just want to close out today's program with just a really beautiful video by the Puerto Rican hip-hop artist Residente. In English, it's titled Beneath the Rubble. And Residente's been doing a lot of promotion on Instagram and commentary on what's been going on in Gaza. And this Beneath the Rubble video he did with vocals by Amal Merkas is just really beautiful. We're only going to play a small clip of it, but go to YouTube or wherever you get music from and watch it. And so with that, Annie, let's say goodnight. Yep. We'll be back here next Thursday night at 5 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Central time, and 8 p.m. Eastern time. So, Residente.
Pero resistimos con poca agua, como los árboles de olivo vivimos, y nuestros hombros cargamos con todos los escombros. Bajo los escombros están los festejos del que dispara de lejos, del que apretó el botón rojo y no se atrevió a mirarme a los ojos. Bajo los escombros se reescribieron las historias que no se han contado. Están los libros que nunca leyeron, los soldados que nos bombardearon.
y allá